Hello, April. Thank you so much for joining me. April Tam is joining me today, everybody. I always start the same way. How do we know each other?
We are both connected with the Five Ventures, of course, an incredible organization that equips men and women who are still in prison or who are previously incarcerated to start their own small businesses and using entrepreneurship and business skill to really have a new exciting chapter of their lives.
I want to talk to you about what it is like to be both an entrepreneur and to have a day job. So if you would explain to everyone a little bit about your day job, and then we'll talk about your entrepreneurial side business.
Yeah, by day, I work on Wall Street. I am in equity derivatives. I've been at the same firm for 15 years on the trading floor and talk to hedge funds. And then by night, which we can touch on a little bit later, is that I run and co-founded a vegan restaurant that has a few little PSs at the end, and we call it PS Kitchen. You would realize when you're reading the menu that it's a unique restaurant that you don't often come across. PS, we actually donate 100% of the profit, so the people who founded it, who funded it, would never make a single penny off of the venture. PS, we employ people who are more vulnerable, who might need a second chance, whether it be, of course, immigrants in the restaurant industry, people coming home from prison, which is how we know each other. Also, women who are survivors of trafficking, as well as those who've struggled with homelessness in the past.
Did you always feel this way? Did you wake up one day and say, you know what, I feel like I should be doing more? Tell me a little bit about your personal journey in that way. Who was April Tam as a child?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because I do always get asked, like, well, why did you start a restaurant?
Right.
And I really have to say, well, do you have time for me to go back like 10 years to really explain the why? As you can imagine, I didn't just wake up one day and say, let me risk just most of my savings, sign a 15-year lease in Times Square at the age of 30, which was really scary to start a venture like this. I think I would always say there are two core parts that kind of made me decide to live in this way. One is the fact that I'm an immigrant, and then secondly, it's my faith. You know, even my mom, like, she started working full-time in a clothing factory when she was 11 years old. She was already working for actually a few years by then. She just moved to full-time because she was now tall enough to not make it look so obvious.
And where was this?
This was in Hong Kong, where she had immigrated from China, mainland China, to Hong Kong as a little girl. And it was just her and my grandma, because my grandma couldn't take all three girls at once. She just thought it was going to be way too overwhelming to try to make a living and to take care of three kids. So they rented a bed, not even like a room, but an actual just bunk bed. They rented like an upper bunk, and my grandma would go to work, and my mom for the first few years would just play in the bed. And then by the time she was kind of old enough, she started working. And I think I say all that because I realized, you know, you can be the hardest worker in the world, and you can have made so many of the right decisions and whatever it is that might lead to someone's success. But it's so true to me that you also really need to be born in the right decade, right? In the right environment. And my mom and I, I'm sure, have very similar capacity, intelligence, or whatever you might call it. But when I was 11, we got a chance to move to the US and started just a whole different chapter.
Something that you said about your mom and then you reminds me of my mom with me, and my mom saying all the things and jobs she wished she could have held, but she was raised to be a wife.
Yeah.
And one thing she always said to me was, you can be anything. And I was aware of the fact that that was new. Getting to the restaurant, did you try anything else in between? Or did you just have this aha moment where you were like, oh no, the restaurant is what's going to pull it off?
No, as probably, and you're an entrepreneur too, you know, you just make as many mistakes as possible and trying it all.
My biggest success as an entrepreneur was acting, and that tells you how hard being an entrepreneur is. That was the one that was successful. Entrepreneurship is so hard.
Yeah, I definitely have tried. I'm grateful that there is something about, I think, my immigrant background and seeing how my mom made it work in the US. I mean, she didn't speak, I mean, she still really doesn't speak any English. And yet she opened up a clothing factory in Miami. I remember like going after school, you know, after my middle school, and we would just be like cutting off the strings. And that's kind of like what you do. And she and my dad just made it work. And so I think there was never a fear in me of starting a business. I didn't really plan for my life to work out that way. I really wasn't planning on going into finance, or, you know, when I first went to MIT, I thought I was going to be an engineer, and it just kind of worked out that I thought, okay, I'll try this finance thing for a little bit. But I think through doing business school, a little entrepreneurship like seed was really planted in me, but I didn't have that passion if it's not also related to justice and passion for those who are marginalized. So yeah, it kind of was like the perfect explosion, if you would. After my first few trips to that orphanage in South Africa, then I went to Haiti for the first time. And after a few trips to an orphanage, I started to really see what it meant to see that a lot of these kids are actually economic orphans. You know, they
absolutely,
yeah, and their parents, a lot of times their moms at least, are still alive, around. And I have watched, like,
that is so painful.
Oh yeah, I watched a woman, young girl actually, wanting and insisting giving away her kid because she truly believes that this child would have a better life at an orphanage. And I started to get really interested in social businesses overseas. And I still sit on the board for an organization that creates jobs in Haiti, that bring down clothing orders from like Lululemon and different companies like that. And I saw what a job can do for someone. And that's when my brain really started to churn of like, what business can I start?
I love that as a thought of seeing what a job can do for someone. And I'm going to just reiterate, start today.
Yes.
And
start small, start today.
What'd you say?
Start small, start today.
Start small, start today. I just love that. Talk about the wraparound effect of what it feels like to go and trade these large sums of money in a day. And then you go to Pia's Kitchen and someone is like, I am so thankful that I was able to have food. What does that feel like? And how do you reconcile that in a 24-hour period?
I can't even explain what a gift it is. Like, I feel like words can't really explain it, because so many people sometimes, and I'm grateful for it, you know, people saying like, oh, that's so wonderful that you do all these things outside of work. How do you do it, etc. But I actually feel like if I didn't do that, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done 15 years at my firm. I couldn't have, kind of funny enough, like gone up this like corporate ladder. It's because I have such a sense of purpose that I'm really grateful for, that allows me to see why I do what I do during the day.
You know, one of the hardest parts of nonprofit work, and where I see people whose work I so admire struggle, is funding.
If there is a way to come up with some source of sustainable funding, some sort of like social business aspect to it, it would be pretty life-changing. I know I've quoted Dr. Muhammad Yunus many times the last time we chatted, but Dr. Yunus had once said, $1 to charity has one life, and $1 to a social business has infinite life. Yeah. So if you can create that social business aspect, then it could be a lot more sustainable.
What is the biggest pothole you stepped in as an entrepreneur?
Oh my God.
How did you get out of it? I know, right? Which gigantic potholes do you want to talk about right now?
Like, I was the only one that was 30. You know, my co-founders and my husband, everyone else was in their 20s, so I was like the oldest one. We're
Oh, I thought you were gonna say was older. Oh
you
my
know,
God.
kid with this crazy idealistic dream. And yeah, it was really hard. You know, my husband and I were 3 months married when we signed this lease. So imagine the next 2.5 years of being like, what did we do to ourselves? And the black hole that we were constantly feeding money into and building a department, you know, the DOB and just things that was really, really hard. And, you know, I had this amazing project manager. His name is Rob, and I hired him to help me build this restaurant, and he was such a gift to me. And a year after I'd hired him, he just said to me, April, I think I'm done being paid by you. I love what you're doing, and I just can't see you burn money like this anymore.
Oh, that makes me teary.
I know. And he just said, I'm going to keep going. And if you want to expense my train out from DC, take that. But otherwise, I want to work for you guys for free. And he did that for another 15 months after.
Does he come to PS Kitchen now?
I mean, he lives in DC, but whenever he's in New York, he would come often. And just have cheerleaders like that.
Yes.
And that was really what got us through. I had a lot of people who lovingly, I mean, I don't blame a single one of them. And a lot of people lovingly say, like, are you sure you want to keep going? Like, I think, you know, it was a great idea, and it might not hurt to just think about taking your losses short. And I really had to wrestle with that and just want to make sure, am I being stubborn? Am I being wise? At the end of the day, I just thought, hey, like on my deathbed or when I meet my maker, am I going to say, I'm so glad I like selfish my little savings? Or am I going to say, I'm glad I gave it my all, you know?
You know, now it's a lot around politics, but it's just a position in general that I hear people take, which is of trying to keep more for themselves. Like it's important, you know, like my family will be better off if I don't pay as high taxes, or if I can keep more in here. And similar with my nonprofit, I took a large chunk of my savings and said, I am going to invest this in the human experience.
Yeah.
And creating a positive human experience for as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful to you for this example of experience and of togetherness with other human beings. It's so just magnanimous and magnificent.
It's something I want people to experience, you know? I really love the idea, and I've experienced it to be super true, the idea that generosity is contagious, you know? And it's just so contagious. We kind of took a leap of faith, you know? Yeah, we stepped out in faith as idealistic kids and just risked it, really almost risked it just all. But yet, I have received so much, and it's not always in the way that it's monetary or like someone helping me and whatnot. But gosh, I would never give back any of that experience. Like you said, I remember, you know, the first time I stepped foot into Walk Hill prison, and I had no idea at all that one of the staff I'd hired from a Defy Ventures Christmas party actually came from this prison. I had no idea that he was a well-loved idol almost of that facility. And when the chair of the board introduced me as, oh, and by the way, everyone, like she's the one that hired Saron, and seeing my coworkers from my day job there with me, seeing these men who have been inside for 5, 10, 25, 30 years, all having a standing ovation and just erupting into this just tears and applause. And I just knew, like, God, that was so worth it. Like all the pain was worth it.
It is a process of separation that does not serve anyone.
Yes.
And I really, really hold out hope that we can begin to start thinking about community support when people are younger
Yes.
and support for when people return,
Yeah.
because we need to function as a community. We are not separate individuals. We are already a collective.
It's a lot of things we talked about earlier. It's wherever you are that you found yourself in, there is many layers of privilege that needs to be dissected, and for all of us to really, really reflect deeply about. And once that's done, then how do you, seek justice for everyone around you? A quote that I've always lived by is this idea that charity is giving someone the crumbs off of your table, but justice is inviting that person to a seat at your table. And I just think that's so important to think about. It's when we're talking and having these conversations, it's not about just writing that check, even though that's so important and we all should do it. It's about so much more, and really getting to develop friendship and relationship and just like a support system for people who have been marginalized for various reasons. And I think that's why, for me, I've always lived with this sense of urgency too. If we really were to love our neighbors as ourselves, then yes, I can wait to do certain things maybe after I was better off or after I retired or after XYZ. But I think what drove me to really wanted to start then was, gosh, what if it was my children
Yes.
that are, struggling, that don't have access to school or trafficked? Then you're like, oh my gosh, I need to do something like right now, yesterday. So
You are just creating a better life experience. You were holding the light very bright, and I love that.
yeah,
Um,
thank you.
I always end by saying, if you had to call out a charity to support, what would it be, for people who are watching and are interested? And you may call out whatever you wish, but I would love for you to call out PS Kitchen.
Oh, so sweet. Yes. Well, of course, I would love for people to be a part of PS Kitchen and this movement that we're trying to start. There are a lot of ways to get involved. We are in the process of trying to raise funds to continue to employ people.
I will support you in that.
Thank you.
April, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. Be well, be happy, be you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you.